I was watching a zombie movie the other day, and I was thinking, when I die, I just want to be resurrected from the dead in such like an epic way, just like Frankenstein, lightning, shock and awe, just be brought back from the dead, and then they just wreak havoc.
My question is why?
Well, I mean, why not?
Why the rebellious resurrection?
I think it's funny how, like, your funeral, you're gonna have all these crazy stunts.
Yes.
And then after that, terrorize people when you wake up.
You're one of those people. Something's gonna happen at your funeral.
I mean, like, if you ever wanted to be
zombie.
remembered, like, that's like your last hurrah, and that's something that people will remember.
That's true. They're calling it a celebration of life now, not a funeral.
Exactly. Just making it a celebration.
It's one way to celebrate.
Or you have one of those like spring-loaded things where the body just like sits up, and then like sparklers go off or something like that.
Just kidding. But seriously, he's dead.
I mean, I think it would bring some kind of joy. I mean, it would terrorize people, but at the same time, it would bring some kind of like, oh, you know, he's still dead and he's still making us laugh.
Followed by a decade of therapy.
Charming. Greetings and fist bumps. This is the Raised Eyebrow Podcast, where we get curious about the more curious parts of humanhood, because someone's got to do it. And we're your hosts, Kojo, Alex, and Mike. In this episode, we play with history and take a look at some really important figures from the past that for some reason have either been forgotten or aren't well known or are just victims of people who would just straight up get embarrassed at trivia. Okay, let's go. How's it going, fellas?
Good.
Great.
Yeah.
So history.
Yeah. Always makes for a good Hollywood film. These, historical figures who are unknown.
You know, there's writers trying to dig up some script, romanticizing it. And then...
when they're not striking.
Don't you find like history is kind of like what actually makes a good story?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. There's actually one guy I'm going to mention. It actually hits on that, where his story wasn't compelling enough, so they chose somebody else to talk about.
Well, I think that's what this makes today's topic interesting, because all these folks you would think are interesting enough that they should be known or should be remembered, but for whatever reason, just nope. Just people kind of forgot about them. Maybe there's reasons for that, which we can get into. But let's jump into it. Who wants to go first?
I'll go first just because we teased this one. So everyone knows, or most people know, the story of Paul Revere. For those who don't, during the American War of Independence, Paul Revere rode from Boston to Western Massachusetts. He rode 12.5 miles. And there's a statue in downtown Boston commemorating Paul Revere. He's had stamps made about his harrowing journey because he was able to alert the Allies about the British coming, and then they were able to defend Boston in time. Mm-hmm. And then this was also commemorated.
Why didn't he send a text?
Sorry? Yeah, no, he could just send a text. Yeah.
Why didn't he send a text?
Yo, Brits coming. All back. Signed PR.
Get out.
And then this was most famously remembered in a poem, Paul Revere's Ride by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. However, there was one guy, his name was Israel Bissell. Revere rhymes very well in a poem, but Israel Bissell does not rhyme well at all. No offense to Israel. And so he is less known. However, he rode 4 days and 6 hours, covered a total distance of 345 miles from Massachusetts to Philadelphia.
Sheesh.
Yeah. Even in a car, that would have been a long journey. So way more epic journey, still successful in terms of getting the forces to come defend, but completely overlooked in history. Even though arguably he rode 30 times further distance, but because his name doesn't sound good in a poem,
No dice.
Got lost to history. Yeah.
No respect.
That's
yeah,
sad.
Never heard of this guy.
Yeah.
Like
Israel.
You know what? He should have put it in on his Instagram.
He puts a story out.
He never posted it. It never happened.
no respect.
Remember to like and subscribe for more updates about the British advancements.
That's an interesting one. You want to go next, Coach Joe?
Yeah, I'll go next. So this one is, it's a bit interesting in the sense that I think a lot of credit is not given, and it has something to do with vaccination. So remember the first vaccinated women. I mean, people on the media were two black women. It was a nurse and then the lady that took the vaccination. I think it's very interesting for me that the two people were women and then two were black people. And then when you fast forward, there are two accounts. One is from History Channel, and then the other one is from the CDC's website. The History Channel version talks about a guy named I can't pronounce the name, but it's Onesimus.
Is this for the COVID vaccine?
No, so this is the story of vaccination.
Like the first,
Oh,
And-
you're going way
polio
back.
or-
Yeah, so
Like way back.
yeah. So COVID. I'm referencing the fact that the people that pioneered the showing, like, for everyone to be like, okay, this is accepted. Because remember, there was a time when black people were like, oh, we don't get COVID.
Yeah.
But then the people who were, stood in front of the vaccination happened to be two black women. And then when you go back in history, where vaccination actually originated, which we don't talk about.
The Congo.
So in
Congo.
African history, African history, there are a lot of things that Africans do that usually weren't accounted, and scarifications is one of them. And this act of the scarifications is also medicinal in itself. So during slave trade, there was this guy named Onesimus, Onesimus,
Yep.
who pretty much brought to the attention of his owner about how you can vaccinate through infesting someone with the bacteria of a cow, which in a way it's like vaccination in a way, but through wound. But then the funny thing about him is his name, which comes from the Bible, which is the meaning of trust. But then his people didn't even trust it. So when he brought to the attention that you can actually infect someone with the pus of an infected animal, they didn't really believe him.
Yeah.
But then they tried it and it worked. So this is around 1700s. So this is in America. Mm-hmm. But then when you fast forward in 1749 in Europe, I'm like, wait, how come these guys didn't know about this discovery back then? Because this is actually on CDC's website saying that the guy who invented it is a European guy, and that was in 1749, and his name is Edward Jenner. Mm-hmm. Right? So I'm like, wait, aren't they referencing exactly who came up with this idea? But Jenner also discovered it from a maid named Sarah Nelmes, Nelmes, who also accounts the same thing. I think this Sarah might probably be a European woman, mm-hmm. but then probably worked with around cows, and then also was infested with the disease. So she couldn't get the sickness.
Yeah.
So then Edward experimented on Jenner Gardner's son, James Phipps, and then it worked. So then he actually wrote a book on the origins of vaccination inoculation, right? And I'm like, wait, so all these things happened, and then none of these people were credited for it, especially the African American slave who brought to the attention of his enslaver about how you can actually heal people from this sort of vaccination. It's very interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. It's interesting. Like, I wonder how many of these types of stories exist throughout history. You know?
Right.
Yeah. It could be that they were discovering things that are similar to each other, because sometimes it's for this specific disease and then you get credit for that, but then they would apply similar learnings to a different disease and you would get credit. Someone else would get credit for the other one. That's usually how it works in medicine, because not all diseases are created equal. It's possible that was the case. I don't know. I have to look it up, but it is interesting though. Like just all of this stuff, like even Sir Alexander Fleming, who came up with penicillin. That was another like huge achievement, but again, still in the same camp. Like he didn't invent vaccines, but he created something that did go a long way to helping a lot of people. So
yeah, help change the world, which leads me to one of the people who I researched that doesn't get a lot of credit for discovering or contributing to the discovery of DNA. And it was a woman named Rosalind Elsie Franklin. I heard that there was a woman who helped discover DNA, but never got the credit. And I actually heard it in like a trivia game or something like that. And it's popped up here and there, but I never like dove into who she was or what her history was. So Rosalind Franklin lived from the 1920s to 1958, and she was a British chemist and X-ray crystallographer. And her work was central to the understanding of molecular structures of DNA, RNA, viruses, coal, and graphite. And although her work on coal and viruses were appreciated in her lifetime, her biggest contributions came with the discovery of the structure of DNA, but they were largely unrecognized during her life. And she's been given various nicknames post-mortem. She's been called the wronged heroine, the Dark Lady of DNA, the Forgotten Heroine, a feminist icon, like real feminism, not the modern feminism without nuance, and the Sylvia Plath of molecular biology. So she was definitely influential in the science realm. She was born in Notting Hill, London, into an affluent and influential British Jewish family. So yeah, I didn't know too much about her. I just kind of heard about her passively a few times, but I found that she's pretty interesting with regards to something that's super important to understanding disease and just humans, which is DNA. You know.
Yeah, and even just like other species, viruses, anything, aliens,
the whole shebang.
You know. Yeah.
Alien DNA. Yeah. Next.
I learned about her one point, but I forgot what her name was, and yeah, I'm glad you brought it back up, because that's like, even just to discover that, because these are not anything you can really find with any microscopes. I don't even know even today, let alone at the time. So because it's so small, right? So,
she didn't live long either. I think most of her work was in the 30s, I believe. But back then, like, how do you even go about all that? There's got to be a movie made about her.
There should be, yeah.
It should be common knowledge that she helped with this, but she never got the credit that she deserved, from my understanding. But
I mean, I don't know why. Like they're looking for like stories where they want to promote more diversity in our history, and like here's
she's perfect.
A woman who, she's perfect, yeah. Like,
right? She's like a woke dream.
Exactly, yeah.
But I think back then because she was a woman, unfortunately, she didn't get any credit. So
Yeah.
that's a case of
Yeah. I mean, like, there's no argument that it's like, oh, because they're women, people are not gonna, listen to the story or buy whatever. And it's like, there are probably more women who are more interested in these sort of things than men. So why not just, promote it? Like,
Yeah.
why are we hiding all these
Yeah.
achievements?
Just to stick with the scientist or medicine here, this one is something that is, it is a discovery, and it's something that kind of was lost to history. But looking at it today, it's kind of like, why did it take so long? So there's this one man named Ignaz Semmelweis, and he was an early pioneer of antiseptic procedures.
Apparently, with his so this is years before germ theory was popularized, and he helped reduce the deaths of mothers and babies in the maternity ward from 12.24% to 2.38%. And all he did was just institute like a hand washing policy, and he was super strict with the doctors and the staff to follow it, because before then it was like fashion for doctors to wipe their hands on their coattails after performing surgeries and autopsies, and then the gore was like a badge of honor from those who graduated medical school and did their first surgeries. So they're just walking around in blood like, yeah, I made it. And then these women would hang out on these bed sheets like after dozens of women before them, and nobody knew anything about hygiene. So yeah, Ignaz Semmelweis was definitely an important dude. He helped implement like hand washing basins, helped get them installed. But kind of a sad ending to his life. He passed away in his early 40s in a mental institution because he was battling a lot of guilt and depression that was caused by knowing that he had contributed to the demise of hundreds of mothers and babies. But I guess it's a mental health issue, because obviously he contributed to like revolutionizing medicine. So I don't know. I guess it sucks, right? Kind of a dark ending to his life. Yeah, he didn't get the big picture of his contribution, but it's definitely a huge contribution, and nobody knows about him. Ignaz Semmelweis.
Yeah. All right. So the next one for me is the building of the Brooklyn Bridge. I mean, it was designed by a male architect, blah, 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 blah. But the most important part that I want to focus on is Emily Warren Roebling. She is pretty much considered as like the first engineering woman in history. I'm sure there's probably even more people before her, but in accounts, she's the only one that we know. The interesting thing is she's not an actual engineer. She went to school for law, but then when they were building the bridge, there are lots of like innovation that was involved in just building this Brooklyn Bridge. So if you guys are the Brooklyn Bridge just joins Manhattan and Brooklyn, and at that time it was a very important achievement because you had to like take ferries, and sometimes it takes forever and all that stuff. So they came up with this incredible engineering feat to build this bridge. And one of the things that they had to do was like actually develop a certain form of like a capsule that goes under the water and is wooden, and they would dig under the ground till they hit the bedrock, and then from there they would build the bridge. In a way, Brooklyn Bridge is a suspension bridge. Building the two sections, lots of people died, including the engineer and even the engineer's son. And I think when the husband passed, Emily had taken on the role of her husband's engineering occupation to get the job done. And I think it's such an amazing, incredible achievement for a woman to be leading a group of men at that time to build this.
What year was it, Kojo?
Yeah, I think it would probably be around the 1800s.
Just Googling quickly. Brooklyn Bridge opened in 1883.
And then the coolest thing too about this is right after it was built, and in the opening of the bridge, she was among the first people to go over in a horse carriage.
Damn.
I'm gonna switch things up a bit. I'm gonna go more on the technology side. These two gentlemen are both had to do with computers, and probably both had a very big role to play on the devices that we're using to record this and the device you're using to listen to this. So the first one you may know, his name is Alan Turing.
Oh, yeah.
There's a really good movie starring Benedict Cumberbatch who plays Alan Turing called The Imitation Game. Mm-hmm. And so Alan Turing, he was a mathematician who famously built essentially what was the first computer, which was called the Turing machine during World War II. The Allies used this device to successfully decode German communications, which led to a lot of lives spared, and possibly resulted in an earlier conclusion to the war in Europe. The Turing machine essentially forms the basic programming structure, so binary code, for pretty much every computer device today. And your phone, your laptop, smartwatch, what have you, television, smart television. It's all using binary code, all based on what Alan Turing did then. And he was a gay man, and because of the time he was in, that was very, very frowned upon at the time. Fortunately, we've made a lot of progress since then, and he was kind of pushed aside in history for a long period of time, and he kind of died alone. I think, actually, how did he die? Yeah, he died in 1954 in his house. And actually his housekeeper ended up finding him dead. And he had died the previous day at the age of 41 with cyanide poisoning.
Oh, wow.
So I think he poisoned himself.
Oh, damn. Killed himself.
Yeah. But even though he was a brilliant person and he saved a lot of lives in the war and did quite the remarkable thing, because of his orientation, it's kind of a sad mark on history, really. But
it is.
Great person.
You hear about him a lot now with the Turing test, which obviously he developed, but especially with in today's world with AI, right? Yeah. So the Turing test is essentially it's a test that judges when a machine becomes indistinguishable from a human. So like if you're quizzing a human and a robot, if you don't know who's answering the question, then the Turing test passes for that machine. Chess, like the machines can beat humans now in chess.
Yeah. They use it for those CAPTCHA things. When you're filling out a form and it says, "I'm not a robot."
Oh, yeah.
Part of that is essentially like a Turing test, because the way that a human would fill out the page and go through the page,
interesting,
has there's certain patterns that we do that a robot would not do those patterns, because the robot would be like, why am I wasting time reading?
Yeah. I wasn't programmed to do this.
Yeah. And so that's Alan Turing. And then fast forward several decades later, another person, his name is Dennis Ritchie. He was a computer programmer. He created the C and B programming language, and most notably was a key player in the creation of the Unix operating system. The Unix operating system is not something that you can buy at a store. However, Mac OS uses a Unix operating system to run the actual programs itself. And then another one is called Linux, which is based on the Unix operating system, and the Android operating system uses Linux, which uses Unix. So probably the phone that you have in your pocket uses the Unix operating system, which was created by Alan Ritchie, and a larger team, but he was a key player in that.
Yeah, the more you know.
Yeah.
I could piggyback off that from a tech point of view. Do you guys know the inventor of the World Wide Web? Fun quiz question. Trivia question.
I think
Al Gore.
I think I know, but
You're right. It was Al Gore.
Al Gore.
No, just kidding.
Was it really? No, was it?
No, definitely not. It was a British guy named Tim Berners-Lee.
Oh, yeah, I heard that name.
he pops up once in a while, but like I feel like the average person on the street wouldn't know who invented the World Wide Web. So
is he rich?
I don't know. I don't know much about his life. I just have basic information. So he's still alive. He's an English computer scientist, best known as the inventor of the World Wide Web. He's currently a professional research fellow at the University of Oxford and a professor emeritus at MIT. So Berners-Lee proposed an information management system on March 12th, 1989, and then he implemented the first successful communication between what we know as HTTP, but it stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol, and server via the internet by mid-November of that year. So yeah, Tim Berners-Lee. I don't know if he's rich, but they should name a car after him, like Tesla.
Yeah.
Or something important. Let's see. It's definitely graded.
I don't think it'll catch on. I give it 2 weeks. It's a fad.
It's just a trendy thing that people are.
Yeah, just something that kids are into these days. They'll grow out of it.
Yeah,
like all kids.
Yes.
You remember back in the 90s when you would be watching television and then they would tell you to go visit their website? And they'd be like, visit us at http://www.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, he's 68 years old. Our buddy Tim, still alive. He's got a lot of credentials in his field, so he's definitely a respected figure in that industry, but not so much in like general knowledge, pop culture.
Yeah,
he's no Bill Gates, or.
Wouldn't it suck that lots of people made money from his invention?
Yeah, but
he should be like the third world's richest man or something.
Nope,
at least
just the guy who contributed to literally the most important thing in our lives right now. And he's a private guy from his Wikipedia page, so he doesn't like to be in the public too much. He just kind of does his own thing as a computer programmer / special nerd.
I find a lot of them they live like quiet lives.
What if he's private, but then he's probably like an internet hacker?
He's like a part of Anonymous, like hacking the.
It's a conflict of interest.
I find a lot of them are private though. You know who Steve Wozniak is?
Yes.
So everyone knows who Steve Jobs is, but Wozniak was like he was a real techie of the two, right?
Yep, the two Steves.
And he's a math teacher. He just like after he left Apple, he
really?
just teaches math now. He still gets royalties, I think, but I don't think money's an issue. But yeah, he's a math teacher.
Cool.
Yeah, I think in a way, wouldn't you say he's probably the brains, like the actual maker, like the one who actually made the product, Apple product.
Yeah, but like Jobs was like the marketer, right?
Steve to me seems like
I think they needed each other.
Yeah.
I remember Steve Jobs left and then he joined again. Like it wouldn't have worked without both of them. And there was a third guy, wasn't there?
Both of them.
Who's the third guy? His name wasn't Steve.
I can't remember who he was. Probably should look him up. But yeah, like Jobs was notable for making so a lot of computers at the time, the keyboard would have been attached to the monitor. So it was very like uncomfortable to work with because the monitor had to be so close. So one of the things that he pushed was like make the keyboard come off so you can actually like have the monitor back. The mouse was something that they pushed for. Those come in handy today. The having like if you have like an icon on your thing, like the fact that it looks like a little picture, so like there's a little trash can, a little folder, little save icon, that was something that they really pushed for. So have like making the operating system more visual. So these are all things that it wasn't just Jobs, but Jobs was like one of the major players behind it, and that was the early days of Mac. And then you fast forward to when Jobs really came back, which is when the actual whole thing became more designed and became more of like a definitely upstaged all their competitors.
For sure. Jobs was more of like the creative visionary in that duo. And he was definitely like more obsessed. Like he was controversial with like his, working habits and all that. which unfortunately probably led to him getting cancer later on in life. He just didn't take great care of himself, and all that unhappy stuff. But he was a genius for sure. I think both of them needed each other to make that Apple thing work, and here we are.
Right.
And then just to wrap up our little bio on Tim Berners-Lee, he actually got knighted by Queen Elizabeth in 2004, so he did get respect. And he married a Canadian chick in 2014. Yeah.
Oh, really?
So, fun guy. Still alive. 60-something years old. Or was it 68 years old? All right. Next.
Nice.
Any other...
the next person on the list is Garrett Morgan. Garrett Morgan is an African-American inventor. I think the reason why I bring him up is also because he did a lot of things, and I mean, some he got credit for, others kind of hurt his career in a way. So he started as a sewing machine mechanic. And through that, he was able to come up with an invention for a hair relaxer, which is because he's working with machines, he had to come up with an invention for an oil to help with lubrication. And through that, he invented this hair relaxer, which, I mean, African American people, we like just doing crazy things to our hair. I think that's interesting.
I saw that Chris Rock documentary.
And then he, and then he developed a breathing device, which initially was supposed to be used for firemen when they were going through buildings with fire and stuff. But it got adapted for war, which was what the mask that they used during war, to protect themselves from gases and stuff. But there's a story behind this which is interesting. So there was an explosion in a mine in Cleveland, which is when they were building a tunnel under Lake Erie. And when he heard the news, he took his device, and him and one other guy went into the tunnel and saved 2 people and then 4 dead bodies. But then at this moment, people discovered that, he is a black person. By the realization of this, it kind of hurt his business, because then they noticed that, he's the guy who's been inventing these things, and then they stopped buying his stuff, which is like crazy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Like, come on. I think probably that's the reason why a lot of African Americans would invent something, but then they would put a white person behind the product. Even it happens right now. Like in Ghana, you still have businesses in Ghana where there's like a white person in the front, but then because Ghanaian people would not even buy their own person's products. It's crazy. Anyway.
Yeah.
He later on also improved the traffic light. Apparently, there were signals for signaling people as they're, like on the streets. Back in the days, there were always pedestrians. You have cows, you had horses, all using the roads. He came up with a system which allows people to stop when the other people are supposed to be passing. So he improved on what was the existing traffic light signals. And I think the reason why he did that was because there was an accident, which he was like, why did this happen? This shouldn't happen. So then he came up with this invention. Yeah. I think he's such a very interesting guy because it's like he was always trying to solve society's issue.
There's a few things interesting about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know about him?
No, but there's one thing that you said that got me thinking was the fact that like he was successful in business and up until the point that they found out he was black, and then it was unsuccessful. It reminded me of this one film called The Banker, which is based on a true story. So there's 2 major characters in it. Joe Morris, who is played by Samuel L. Jackson. He's in everything. And the other person was Bernard Garrett, who was played by Anthony Mackie. You probably know him as the Falcon from the Marvel Comics movies.
Yeah.
So
He's
Bernard
in a few
Garrett and
things.
Joe Morris. Sorry?
He's in a few things. Anthony Mackie.
Yeah. So Bernard Garrett and his character, or sorry, that real person, he was from Texas and he wanted to like get into real estate to become successful, and he was successful, but at the time in Los Angeles, you could only buy in black neighborhoods, and so they got they had like a white person who they were friends with. I can't remember how they were friends with him, but they got him to be like the face of their company. So they would like coach him and train him on how to like make sales and stuff like that. And then the white person, I can't remember his name, he ended up negotiating the deal to buy a bank using Bernard Garrett and Joe Morris. Yeah, Joe Morris's money.
Right.
And so you have these two black people essentially buying a big bank in downtown Los Angeles. So they now own it. And because they own the bank, they were able to start buying all these other properties and negotiating the mortgages for them. And nobody knew for the longest time, up until the point where they went to Texas to essentially expand their business into Texas, which is where Bernard Garrett was from. And Texas was very segregated at the time. And that's when they eventually found out what was going on. And the movie actually depicts that part. It's really good. But yeah, it's because the whole reason why they were using the white person as like the front was because they were scared that if they found out that it was run by black people, they would lose all their money, which is grim.
Sad.
And that was only in the
feel
60s.
Yeah, I feel like that was just everyday life back then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy. But
the aliens would attack Earth, and then and they would have everyone like on their team, including like, you know, women, gay, lesbian, all on one team, and then we are going to be left with one group of people fighting the aliens.
Yeah.
Why not all of us like just unite together and just work together? Like, you know, it's like
humans.
Come on.
The tribalism is real. Maybe if the aliens were really bad, we'd all unite.
Yeah,
Maybe.
Like even when our government says everybody stay home and watch TV all day, we can't even agree on that. There's always the group of people like, no, I want to go outside. You can't tell me what to do.
Don't tell me what to do. Yeah.
Okay, fine. You can go outside. No, I want to stay inside and watch TV. Okay, you could do both. Just
I think that's just human nature. We're just so like combative. There's something inside us that says, you know, I need my freedom.
Why don't they just try like reverse psychology?
It's funny, like even in movies when the aliens attack, it's always Americans who are fighting the aliens. Why are they like getting help from like India, China, and Europe?
I mean, in reality though, like if you look at actual militaries, it probably would mostly be the American military fighting them.
That's fair. They have the biggest army.
You know, right? Like as we're seeing in Ukraine, like Russia can't even do that well.
Paper tiger. Paper tiger.
Yeah. China, I mean, they threatened, but fortunately they haven't really done anything. So the only one you know of real might is the United States.
It's true.
So
World's largest military.
Yeah.
So China has the largest military as far as active duty military personnel, and then India, and then the U.S. But the U.S. has the most influence by a lot. And then North Korea, which nobody knows North Korea's capabilities from a military perspective. We just know they have nukes, and there's a crazy guy that kind of runs that country. So that's it. Okay, next. Want to do a couple more here?
Yes.
I have a couple. Or do you want to?
Yeah, go for it. No, go for it.
So I guess keep on with these next two people. Actually, these next women are all black women and also deserve their own time in the limelight. So the first one is we all heard of Rosa Parks, right? You know, she famously did not give up her seat on the bus, and not to take anything away from Rosa Parks, definitely deserves her place in history. However, this was 9 months before Rosa Parks did this. There's this woman named Claudette Colvin. She was actually at the age of 15, so very young, in Montgomery, Alabama. She also refused to give up her seat to a white woman on a crowded, segregated bus. And similar to what happened with Rosa Parks, there was a backlash towards Miss Colvin. And then I guess 9 months later, you had Rosa Parks do that, not too far away. And but there was a lot of like bubbling up in the surface, but it was and there might have been other people too who refused to do that as well. But being the time, they don't really write about that in the newspapers or in any kind of history documents. But yeah, Claudette Colvin, she was one person that kind of popped up in history.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I guess that sparked a lot of the outrage that inspired Rosa Parks to do her thing too. So funny, I just Googled why is Claudette Colvin not as famous as Rosa Parks? And this is just the first answer on Google. So do more research by all means. But it says Colvin did not receive the same attention as Parks for a number of reasons. She didn't have what was considered as good hair, quote unquote. And she was not fair skinned. She was a teenager and she was pregnant at the time. So she didn't get she wasn't a good PR move. But Rosa Parks was a better story ultimately. And she was an adult. She was older, an adult woman, and a better leader for the black community at the time.
You see why we're gonna lose the war with the aliens? Like you apply for the job.
We need good PR.
You apply for the job and they're like, you don't have good hair.
You're not a good victim because you don't look good on camera. Like,
nowadays they'll be like, no white people. He's a man. He's a man.
Cancer doesn't matter.
Can we get a more diverse group of fighters?
Oh God!
The platoon has to hit like certain DEI criteria.
We need a quota for our warriors.
We'll give it to this other guy.
We need to storm the beach. I don't know. This group is not meeting our DEI criteria.
Do you know?
We're losing the battle. Doesn't matter.
This is actual.
You have HR reps leading them.
This actual true fact. So my cousin, worked for a company that has like about 2% black people there. So my cousin's picture is in every department. Right? Like,
what the hell?
Like they could be like, hey, the writers department needs a black person, and they're like, hey, where are you? And then they'll bring him and take a photo, and then he goes to the other department.
This isn't a big company, is it? Jeez. The world's gone nuts.
Messed up.
Well, speaking of the world ending, I have my last person that I did research on. So he was nicknamed a real-life Superman, not for the reasons that you think. So this is during the Cold War. There's a Russian soldier named Stanislav Petrov. You've probably heard of this, but I don't think enough people know about this. So he literally saved the world during the Cold War. He was put in charge for one day watching the nuclear weapons readings. And it showed that the U.S. missiles were headed towards Russia. And his orders were to fire back if he saw something like this. But he disobeyed, and it turned out it was a glitch in the system. So thanks to Stanislav, he was patient enough to prevent nuclear war, and we probably wouldn't be here if he hadn't done what he did. So he's known as the man who saved the world among different circles.
Oh, wow.
Fun story.
So he gets put in charge for one day and saves the world.
Yep. So there was a glitch in the system that said U.S. missiles fired towards Russia. This is the Cold War, the peak of it. And he said, hold on a second, I'm not going to push the button just yet. Let me just make sure that this is happening or else we all die.
Wow.
Stanislav Petrov. I've heard of this guy before, but I don't think enough people know about him.
Oh, yeah. So speaking of rockets, this one's about a few NASA mathematicians. So there are 3 female Black American mathematicians. Their names are Katherine Johnson, Dorothy Vaughan, and Mary Jackson. And they worked at NASA during the space race. Their story was depicted in Hidden Figures, very good movie. And Johnson was probably the one who was the most successful of the three. And she worked on calculating the trajectories and launch windows and emergency return paths for the Project Mercury space flights, which allowed them to kind of go up into space, and they would do some spacewalks and orbital work around the planet. And that was very early space flight. But because you actually had a person inside the rocket, you had to make sure that it was going to come back, and calculating how to launch the trajectory so that you're able to go around the planet without flying away and get like slingshotting into space and being lost forever. Also, while making sure that you don't come plummeting back into Earth at rapid speed and tumbling into Earth was also very important. So juggling those two things from a mathematical standpoint, when it's never been done before, is a very, 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 very complicated task. And there was no such thing as a computer as we know it at the time. So she was doing a lot of this math by hand, essentially.
Jeez. What year was this?
Yeah.
This would have been in like the 50s, 60s.
I heard
It would have been the 1950s. Yeah.
Yeah, I heard the name computer comes from to compute, and these people were
they were called computers. That was their job title.
Yeah.
Wow. Did not know that. The more you know.
Yeah, computer used to be a job title. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, technically the machine took that job title, but it just allowed them to do more stuff, right?
Yeah.
Which is kind of the lesson with like AI now, is like, yes, computers will do stuff like what a computer used to do, but it will allow you to do bigger and greater things, right? Mm-hmm. Which all three of these women had very successful careers. The movie kind of depicts a lot of segregation in it. Well, there was segregation at the time. This was in Florida. However, on NASA premises, I think they were more appreciated, more accepted, or more appreciated for what they were doing, because they had a human life in their hands. Like, they were responsible for it. Like, you know, if you're doing a calculation, like, there's a human life at the end of that, and you got to make sure that it comes back safely. And all of the astronauts, even today, can thank these women for that work.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like the story went to, you know, like Neil Armstrong. Even Neil gets more credit than the other guys do.
Yeah. Buzz Aldrin.
Yeah. Actually, Buzz Aldrin, yeah. There's this funny story. I was at the Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C. Great place if you're ever there. And they had this one mock-up where there was like the lunar module, and there was a figure who was kind of coming down the ladder. I think it was Buzz Aldrin who was coming down the ladder second, because this image was taken by Neil. And he famously paused halfway on the ladder for like a brief second, and then he continued. And when he was asked, like, why did you pause on the ladder? Like, were you okay? Because this is before he touched down on the planet. And it's because he had to go pee, and he was debating, should he go back into the module and go pee in his suit, or should he he just waited on the ladder and he went pee.
Oh, nice.
He
thought he held it, but guess not.
He was debating what should do.
Savage.
It's funny how this is like the first broadcasting too.
Yeah. I think it was Buzz Aldrin, yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, that's just like a small sample size of many people who kind of shaped our lives, shaped our history. Like, this doesn't count the people who worked on the Underground Railroad, bringing, Black people from slavery into freedom.
Even
fought for freedom in countless wars.
Even there's a lot of like story on like the Chinese contribution.
Oh yeah.
Yep. Yeah, we mostly focused on like a North American, European perspective. So there's a lot of people in Middle East, Asia, China,
yeah,
Japan, Korea,
all over the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the
Oh
Japanese.
yeah.
There's a story about an architect who also contributed on buildings. He comes from the when Hiroshima. Wait, no, before Hiroshima. When Americans got attacked in Pearl Harbor, so
Yeah.
all the Japanese that were put into the camps. So he comes
Yeah.
from that environment, but then he also helped design architectural buildings, which was like really big. So I mean, there's a lot of people left out of history that we probably didn't even cover on this story.
You could probably do a podcast just on people that were left out of history.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's like endless supply.
Endless
Yeah.
episodes. Okay, so with that said,
Yeah.
final thoughts.
Just I think just read more history. There's a lot out there, and it is our greatest teacher,
Yep.
and especially the people in it.
Yeah. Not enough
Yeah.
people like or respect history, unfortunately.
Yeah.
My final thought is it seems that history, well, we know that history is written by the winners. And also people influence history based on their influence on society at the time that the history was written, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Rosa Parks being a good
Yeah.
example. But whether it's for political reasons or power purposes, it seems that when the history is written, or at least nowadays, it's remembered based on the people who had power, who wrote the history. Now there's more fact checking and social media, so we don't know what what reality is right now. But at least for back then, that's why they built statues and memorialized emperors and kings and all that. They want it to be remembered, but we don't know about the peasants who probably did some important things.
Yeah. Yeah, mine is stories are always told with a certain kind of an agenda, and the agenda is always helping the one who's telling the story. Like even in this podcast, for instance, like some of the stuff I focused on was my agenda was to bring awareness to especially like women and then Black people. Which in a way it's a way that I'm able to also highlight my influence. But most of the time in every story or biography of a person that usually ends up in a movie or in a book, most of the time the actual stories of the people is very boring, but then we embellish it in a way. So you can ask The Pursuit of Happiness by Will Smith, and the guy whose actual his story will tell you that a lot of the story that Will Smith spoke about was in a way false. It did speak on the story, but a lot of the content was embellished for movie making. So usually when we tell stories, we embellish it in a way that may not be the actual truth, but the agenda is to, bring something up that
We like to romanticize things for Hollywood.
Yeah. So
Sell a few more tickets.
exactly. So I mean, your story might not be interesting, but perhaps there's something to teach about the world in a way.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, that's another episode. Follow us on all the social medias, raisedeyebrow.podcast. And remember, kids, a generation which ignores history has no past and no future. Gun blast.